Do you have gas? Well, if you don't, you better go get some because you can't braise without it. Welcome back, and we're brazing now. All the welding's done, the pieces are put together, and we're ready to move to the next step. What's the difference between welding and brazing? Okay, I'm glad you asked. So, welding, what you're doing is you're taking two pieces of metal and you're putting them together, and then you're using another metal and you're heating it all up, and with that filler metal to fill in the gap, you're adding metal to this and you're fusing it all together and making it one piece of metal. That's kind of like the old test store model glue. When you put that on your plastic, you stick them together and you would make sure they were lined up and they would sit there for hours until the glue dried. That was melting the plastic and it was fusing that plastic together to where it made it into one piece of plastic. Brazing is more like the instant glue, because what you're doing is you're taking a piece of metal, you're sticking another piece of metal on it, and you're using a filler as an adhesive to bond those two together, but they're only bonded at the surface. They're not bonded on a molecular level. So with the brazing, you can always heat it back up, and then if you get it hot enough, you can take it apart because you're going to melt the material. What's holding it together? I use the stick welder rods. These are flux coated bronze welding rods, and what you do is once you get your torch hot enough, you get the two pieces of metal red hot, and then you introduce your filler and into the where you want it to flow, and the heat melts it and it starts to flow, and you just got to kind of feed it. If you've ever done any electrical soldering, it's basically the same thing, just on a little bit bigger scale. How do we get it that hot? So there's propane. Propane is what you're going to use for your regular house plumbing. I'm sure everyone's done it, and it's actually kind of fun. Propane is a great gas. You can use it to cook with, you can heat with it. It's a wonderful gas, but it doesn't get hot enough. Now, so you've got propane, you've got MAP gas, and you've got oxygen. So you can mix the propane and the oxygen and make it a little bit hotter, but it's still not hot enough. So off you go. So you've got MAP gas. So you can use this in a torch. Like I said, it burns a little bit hotter than what the propane does, but it's still not quite hot enough to melt the pieces together that we want. So you mix the MAP gas with the oxygen. How do you mix it? Well, you've got this handy dandy little torch with two heads. So your oxygen goes on, your MAP gas goes on one, your oxygen goes on the other. You always start your whatever either your MAP or your propane first, and then you get it lit, and then you add in your oxygen. The biggest problem that I have to remember with this is a 14 ounce bottle. Same size as this, but this is a 1.4 ounce bottle. So you can't just get in there and mess around and because you're going to run out of your oxygen really quick. So when you're ready to go, you need to get in it, get on it, get it heated up, grab your filler rod, get to melting, and then shut everything off. I used to think that what I was doing was forgetting to turn off my oxygen and it was just leaking out, but it was just that I have 10 times more of this than I have of this. Incidentally, for this project, I had a half bottle of this left over from the last time I used it. This is a full bottle. I used a total of 2.5 bottles just to get what I needed to get done. And that's not the oxygen's fault is my fault because I was slow. I needed to trust myself a little bit more, get that turned on, get that heat on there, and get to cracking. Okay. Enough talk. Let's get to the project. It occurred to me that I might get myself into a standstill on the project because I would have all the brazing done, all the welding done, all the sanding done, and I still needed to get some of the external parts. I'm at the point where I can actually assemble the gun. One of the key components that I was going to be missing was the scope. So I had to get on eBay and find one. And I found one. This particular, there are several different models. I think we talked about that before, depending on the length where this piece intersects that piece. So the smaller ones are the M19. This is the M47A2. And it's in great shape. I got it off of eBay. We're not going to talk about how much I spent on it. But the reason I decided to go for a real one is because my last blaster had a resin one on and it looked great. So no problem there. But I just kind of wanted to go a little above and beyond on this build because of everything I learned the last time. Like I said, lessons from the past. Let's take those lessons and capitalize on them. So what I was planning on doing with this is casting it, and that way I would have this for any future projects. I would already have a scope. I would have the original on my gun, and any props that I build, I would have my own resin cast of the one that I own. I don't have to spend any more money on a scope because I'm just going to be recasting my own. I'm even thinking about maybe casting some extras and putting them out there for sales. There are some out there already. I haven't seen this particular version. Maybe the M38A2 is out there, but I'm glad to have it. I can look right through it. I can see stuff. There's a little scale in there. I'm really kind of curious as to how it works now, though. Anyway, back to the build. Full disclosure on this part, I totally forgot to turn on my mic, so I'm talking and I don't have any idea. Well, I'm not going to say I don't have any idea what I'm talking about, but I'll just work my way through it. So what I did was at first I got the handle brazed on, and then in that last segment you could see where the trigger group has to go inside there. Along that edge there is where the brazing was done, and I just put way too much material. The backside looks a lot better because that was my second attempt, and I kind of gotten it down. The flow was a lot better. I still need to put that second guard that I'm pointing to now. There's another one where I was first pointing. That needs to be brazed on. And then we need to put the magazine holder on. The hard part is trying to get it on there straight because the magazine has to go through that hole. And so I came up with the idea. There's a hole that lines up there, so I'm going to use this brass rod. And I'm going to stick it through the receiver, through the hole. And then I'm going to slide the magazine over that. And so once I braze that on there, everything should be easy peasy from there. But just to make sure that it does stay there straight, because it's going to walk without me having something to hold it, and it's kind of hard to clamp it, I have this wire, this copper wire, that I'm going to go on ahead and twist around, and that'll hold it in place. I can clamp it into the vise, and then finish my brazing. Okay, still hot. It's charred. All the paper's charred here and there, but everything's brazed on there. It is starting to look like a blaster. Just got to make it pretty now, so I'm gonna go work on that. Sorry guys, there's one more piece. Even with all the brazing I've done until this point, I feel like I'm still struggling there a bit. I can't get the metal to flow right, and I'm not getting the metal quite hot enough. But once I get it, I get it. Once you see that metal just turn red hot and everything just starts to really flow and it starts to puddle real well, then you get it, and then you just go for it. You stick that in there, you let it melt, and before you know it, you're done. Just removing the clamp and get the back side of that, and we are gonna call this good. I'm happy to say that I'm done with brazing. Much like the welding, it was an experience, and I had some troubles even on that last bit. Starting off, I felt like I was not getting the metal hot enough, fast enough, and then once it clicked and once it started to flow, it all kind of fell into place. It's still a little bit, it's not look like a professional did it, but we're going to fix that. We're going to go in and smooth it out with some wire brushes or whatever. So what did we get brazed on here? We got that piece there. We got the mag tube, which just like that. Okay. And it's straight, it goes all the way through. And the handle also has the trigger group that needs to go in there. Now what I don't necessarily need is the trigger group. I don't need the trigger to work. I could put it on there and not put the bolt in, but there's just this sound, and you'll get to hear it when I get there, when the spring's in there and you release that and that bolt goes clack. It's like, wow. Here's one thing though, this part right here. It's I've seen it on there for years. You just figure it's a hand grip. It's on there. You see it's on the toys, but you don't really get a sense of what it is until you have one of these. That's what it is. Never knew that. Never knew. That's awesome. So, we've all learned something today. And that was the last piece that had to be brazed in. It clips right in. There. Yeah, so now it won't come off. I'm happy. But right now it just looks like a gun. We're on the path for it to look like a blaster. So we need to take the magazine, cut it down to size for one. We need to put our rail here for our scope. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. And then I will do just an assembly video of putting the bolt in, and you'll see all that good stuff later. But for now, you need to go build something. I did. Pew, 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 pew. Go build something. Pew, 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 pew. And you're like, what? Wait a minute. Wait, what?